Good evening. We'll continue with UN reforms and what are the major obstructions, what are the major impediments, what are the major obstacles to the UN Security Council reforms. We are talking about the UN Security Council reforms. Why it is not happening, why it is being delayed. First important factor why UN Security Council reforms are not happening or it's not taking place is primarily on account of unwillingness on the part of 5 permanent members of UN Security Council. They are not willing, despite there being a difference between China and US, despite there being difference between Russia and US, right? Despite there being difference between France and Britain on certain issues, but on one point, all of them are on the same page. That is, that they do not want to any structural change in the UN Security Council. Because right now, they are holding all the powers and they do not want any structural change in the UN Security Council that would lead to reduction of their power. All right. So unwillingness on the part of 5 permanent members of UN Security Council is the most important reason why UN Security Council reforms, they are not taking place. One country opposing other countries. China is against India. Pakistan is against India. China is against Japan. Italy is trying to compete with Germany. Germany is a part of G4. So Italy is trying to compete with them. So whenever a proposal comes of including Germany, so Italy would try to compete with that. Brazil is another G4 country, which is an equally a claimant for UN Security Council seat along with India. Now, Argentina is again creating a hurdle. Argentina is competing with Brazil. So far as African region is concerned, about Latin America, I've told you, Argentina and Brazil, they're competing. China doesn't want that Japan should be there. China doesn't want that India should be there. There is no consensus in Africa. Africa has got about Organization of African countries, 54 countries. There is no consensus in Africa that, okay, South Africa being the one of the important powers in the African region, so South Africa should be the natural claimant. But there is no consensus even in Africa. So basically, one country opposing another country's claim. This is one important. Second factor. First factor, I've told you that all 5 members, P5 members, they are together and they do not want any structural change. All right. During 90s, a group emerged within UN, and it was nicknamed as Unity for Consensus. This group emerged within UN. All right. And it was nicknamed as Coffee Club during 90s. Even though the name of the group was Unity for Consensus for bringing about a consensus on the question of which country should be joining UN Security Council as a permanent member. So that was the motive. That was the motive of this group, so-called motive, Unity for Consensus. It was sponsored by the Western powers. All right. Officially, the purpose was to bring about a consensus among the member countries so far as UN Security Council reform is concerned. But ultimately, if you look into how it has worked, this is also known as Coffee Club within UN. It worked tirelessly to ensure that there is no consensus on this issue. It calls itself that it is a group of Unity for Consensus, but it ensured that there is no consensus among the member states on the question of expansion of UN Security Council. All right. From African region, there are 4 countries which are competing for that. Nigeria is one, Ethiopia is there, second, Egypt is third, and South Africa is fourth. All right. And this suits P5 countries. This suits them. One country opposing other would be suiting them. In Latin America, as I have told you, that region, Argentina is competing with Brazil. So there is no consensus. And moreover, these P5 countries, they would always try to play the game of divide and rule. So it is very difficult. UN Security Council reforms, they are very difficult. Why? The situation I have told you. Now we have to find out what was the formula for reforms that was given earlier, or what was the formula that was being considered. Kofi Annan, the former UN Secretary General, he had suggested some formula, for discussion on the question of expansion of UN Security Council. So what is that formula? Let us briefly take into consideration that. Kofi Annan, former UN Secretary General, he gave a formula. He said that total strength of UN Security Council is 5 plus 10. 5 permanent and 10 non-permanent. He said that this should be expanded to 24. Okay. What he wanted is that we need to add 9 more members. 15 are there, 5 permanent, 10 non-permanent. And he said that add 9 more to make it 24. That was the suggestion. All right. For that, he gave certain formula. What is the formula 1? The main thing is that it has to be expanded till 24. So formula 1, first formula given by Kofi Annan, it was that 6 permanent members more to be added and 3 non-permanent members should be more added. Okay. 6 plus 3, 9. So 15 plus 9, 24. Add 6 more permanent members and 3 non-permanent members. That is the first formula which was suggested by Kofi Annan. Right? Because it had to be expanded from 15 to 24. Right. Now, the second formula, formula B, that was given by Kofi Annan. Now, whether the extension that is being made, adding 9 members under Formula 1, 6 permanent and 3 non-permanent. Now, there is no mention of whether these members should be without veto power or with veto power. That is another important question. All right. Now, the Formula B. Under Formula B, what he suggested is that 9 more members have to be added. In any case, that is very clear. So he suggested that 8 semi-permanent members should be added. So a new formula was carved out. 8 semi-permanent members more to be added. 8 semi-permanent members and 1 permanent member. So a new category is created, semi-permanent member, under that name. What is semi-permanent members? Means semi-permanent members would be elected for a period of 4 years. So whosoever be elected as a semi-permanent member, they would work for 4 years. After that, again, 4 new semi-permanent members should come. All right. So what you will have, you will have 5 permanent. Okay. Then you have you will have 6 permanent members, 5 earlier, and the new one is 1 more is added. So 6 permanent members, okay, and then you will have 10 non-permanent members, and then you will have 8 semi-permanent members. That is the criteria. 6 permanent, 10 non-permanent, okay, which is existing now, and 8 semi-permanent members for a period of 4 years. So from 5 permanent member becomes 6, non-permanent is already 10, and 8 members, they would be semi-permanent. All right. So again, it will come to 24. All right. So this is the two formulas which have been given by Kofi Annan. Okay. Under the formula A, add 9. Okay. Under that, add 9, I have told you very clearly that 6 would be 6 members that is going to be added. 6 would be permanent and 3 would be non-permanent. All right. And formula B, 8 semi-permanent and 1 permanent. 8 semi-permanent for a period of 4 years and 1 permanent, obviously, is there. So that is the formula given by Kofi Annan. All right. Now, what we need to discuss now is what about India? So we'll take up India's membership to UN Security Council. All right. But before we take up India's member to UN Security Council, one important aspect of discussion which we have not done that we'll do is a question can be asked about India's contribution to the UN. India's contribution to UN, India's peacekeeping contribution to the UN. Right. So I'll be focusing on India's contribution to the United Nations. And after that, we'll come back to the same question. Is India really ready to take the UN Security Council membership? Are we capable? Can we undertake that responsibility? Or what should be our strategy so far as getting a membership of UN Security Council is concerned? What are the viewpoints of the experts? So I'll be taking up that. Right? Now, one thing, what are the benefits for India? Is there any benefit for India if India gets a permanent membership to UN Security Council? Let me answer that question. Okay. Before I pick up the strategy that India should be adopting, what benefits? They can ask you the question is how India is going to be benefited, by becoming a permanent member of UN Security Council. Now, when we say permanent member to UN Security Council, what we presume is that it's a permanent membership along with the veto power. That is what we presume. So first benefit for India is that India would be getting a veto power in the UN Security Council. So automatically, this will increase India's global power. This will lead to enhancement of India's status globally, right? Because India would come at par with the other major powers of the world, particularly the US, China, and the other powers like France and Britain. All right. So India would come. This will lead to enhancement of India's status. Okay. What we are discussing how India is going to be benefited with the UN Security Council permanent membership. All right. So permanent membership with veto power, this will increase India's power. This will increase India's global power, and this will also lead to enhancement of India's status. Several times, if we have seen, when India was not a member, when India is not a permanent member of the UN Security Council, so several times, particularly because of China, and particularly because of China's support to Pakistan for every wrong reason, what we have seen is that there have been many situations when China had used its veto power, for example, on the issue of Masood Azhar being declared as an international terrorist at that point of time. Masood Azhar so China wanted to ensure that Masood Azhar is not declared as an international terrorist. So for that, China used its veto power. Okay, so that kind of situation, if India becomes a permanent member of UN Security Council, so any resolution that gets passed in the UN Security Council and that goes against the interest of India, as the example I've given you, the Masood Azhar on the Masood Azhar case, such case could be avoided. That is another benefit that you will get if India becomes a permanent member of UN Security Council. And once you are a part of the high decision-making table, which takes all major decisions regarding the global power politics. So India would be a part of a higher decision-making table. So that would give India an opportunity to protect its national interest in a better manner. What a point. Now the situation like when Pakistan could, when US could prevail upon India, stop procuring oil from Iran. Or a situation when US threatens India not to procure S-400 missiles from Russia, otherwise we are going to impose sanctions on you. Such a situation could be avoided. Okay, so India cannot be very easily bargained if India is a member of UN Security Council. So it would be very difficult it will be very difficult for other powers to bargain with India. So India would not be easily bargained, right? So means India will be in a better position to protect its national interest if India becomes a permanent member of UN Security Council, and that too with the veto power. All right. Now, so basically the point I'm trying to emphasize upon that how India is going to be benefited, what difference it will make on India's status. So the point is very clear that India would be acknowledged as a global power. India would be acknowledged as a global power. That thing is for sure. Then if India becomes a permanent member of the UN Security Council, right? And one more important point: if India becomes a permanent member of the UN Security Council, that will enhance India's status as a regional power. As that will enhance, apart from raising India's status as a global power, that would also enhance India's status as a regional power. What a point! So that would enhance India's status as a regional power, and kind of situation that we are facing with Pakistan, the kind of situation we are facing with China on the border. What a point. So double frontal, dual front war situation that we are facing with both China and Pakistan. So that kind of situation could be avoided. All right. If India becomes a permanent member of the UN Security Council. So they can ask you the question how India is going to be benefited with the permanent member of the UN Security Council. That is really the point. All right. Now I'll be taking up India's contribution to the United Nations. Okay. They can ask you the question about in what manner India has contributed to the United Nations, because the topic is India and the UN. So what has been India's contribution to the UN? This question can be asked. Or if they ask you the question why India should be considered, on what basis should India be considered as a permanent member of UN Security Council? So the points which I'm giving you, you can add those points there. That because of so much of contribution that India has made to the UN, and that obviously makes India eligible, makes India a claimant for the UN Security Council's permanent seat. Okay. So what I'm going to do now, I will be taking up the major thing is that is about what is India's contribution to the UN. All right. Any question if you have in mind till now that we have discussed about the UN Security Council reforms, what are the impediments to reforms, why it is not happening, or how India is going to be benefited if India becomes a permanent member of the UN Security Council. If you have any questions pertaining to that, you can just ask. If there is no question, I will move further. All right. All right. They can ask you the question about what is India's contribution to the UN. All right. And the point which I am giving you, you could always use those points. If they ask you the question, on what basis India is claiming a permanent member of UN Security Council, or why should India be considered as a permanent member of UN Security Council? So, while talking about that, while giving answer to the question, we can talk about India, the contribution that India has made to the United Nations. All right. See, over the years, undoubtedly, India has, because India believes in United Nations, India believes in international law. So over the period of time, India has made enormous contribution to the United Nations. What are those contributions of India? The first important point when we talk about India's contribution to the UN is India played a key role in promoting the concept of CBDR in the United Nations. CBDR, common but differentiated responsibility. India insisted on developed countries, along with the support of developing countries. Indians prevailed upon the developed countries that this concept, common but differentiated responsibility, should be accepted by the developed countries. What is the meaning of CBDR, common but differentiated responsibility? You see, there are certain problems, particularly if you talk about the problems of poverty in third world countries. If you talk about environmental issues, if you talk about global warming, right? It is every country's responsibility, common responsibility. But those countries which are economically more resourceful, they need to contribute more. And that's why you must have seen that in the climate deal that has taken place, in that developed countries are supposed to give contribution, financial contribution to the developing countries to deal with the challenges of global warming. Because the problem of pollution or the problem global warming that is there in developing countries, it is not only because of developing countries, it's also because of the developed countries. Because the product which is manufactured here is procured by them. They're responsible. If the level of atmospheric pollution is very high, if the quality of the air is very bad in China, for example, particularly in industrial cities of China, it is not that only China is responsible for this. Because the product which is manufactured there is bought by all the countries, including United States of America, including other developed countries, including the European Union countries. So common but differentiated responsibility concept was promoted. That it is responsibility of every country, but differentiated response. Those who are in a position to contribute more because of the financial resources which they have, so they should be contributing more. It is everybody's responsibility. It is common responsibility, but those who are financially more resourceful, more capable, should be contributing. So common but differentiated responsibility was a concept which was promoted by India. India played a lead role in that. So that is the first major contribution that India has made, promoting the concept of common but differentiated responsibility. Now, second, you see, India, along with support of other G4 members, G4 members are Japan, Germany, Brazil, India, G4 members. So India, along with the support of G4 members, have kept the issue of UN reforms alive. UN reforms, this issue has been kept alive by these four countries, India along with the G4 countries. Otherwise, this UN reforms, the UN Security Council reforms, has already been put into the cold storage. But at least the discussion that is taking place in the world today, or at different forums, is primarily because of India and other G4 members. So second contribution of India is that India, along with the support of other G4 members, have kept the issue of UN Security Council reforms or UN reforms still alive. That is the second point that you can mention here when it comes to India's contribution to the UN. All right. The third point that I would like to mention here is India has played a very key role in so far as its contribution to the UN peacekeeping troops is concerned. India's contribution to the UN peacekeeping efforts has been very good, has been extremely good. So India has played a very key role in what is known as, so far as the UN peacekeeping force is concerned. So contribution towards peacekeeping. India's track record has been extremely good. Okay, so India has played a key role so far as contribution to the peacekeeping troops to the UN is concerned. If I could tell you, India has till now contributed about 2 lakh troops on different UN peacekeeping missions. Out of total 71 UN peacekeeping missions, India has been a part of 50 of the out of 71 peacekeeping missions, India has been a part of 50 UN peacekeeping missions. Currently, out of about 16 UN peacekeeping missions going on in different parts of the world, India is a part of 13 UN peacekeeping missions out of it. So, third important point when we talk about India's contribution to the UN is towards this peacekeeping troops. Okay, so out of 71 UN peacekeeping missions, India has participated in 50, and out of 16 ongoing missions, India is a part and parcel of 13 UN peacekeeping missions. So that you can understand. Okay. Until now, about more than 160, 170 Indian peacekeepers, Indian armed forces or Indian police, they have lost their lives in the UN peacekeeping mission. So India's contribution to the UN peacekeeping mission would be considered as a very significant contribution of India. All right. Now, we'll talk about other contributions of India. Is that could be in terms of India had fought for the decolonization of several enslaved colonies after India became a member of United Nations. After India became a member of United Nations, after India became free in 1947. After that, India played a key role in decolonization of a large number of enslaved colonies. So India took up the cause of liberation of the freedom of large number of enslaved colonies. It was because of India's efforts and the efforts of other countries that a large number of enslaved colonies, they became free from their political subjugation. So India's contribution in liberation of colonial countries would also be an important point that we can mention. Correct. Then another important point when you talk about India's contribution to the UN is fight against racialism, anti-racial policies. Fighting against racialism, India again had a very significant contribution. All right. All right. Now, India's contribution towards disarmament. India had piloted several proposals to the UN, okay, for bringing about disarmament. And one of the most significant being a resolution which was piloted by India along with the support of other 21 countries. India, along with the support of other 21 countries, had piloted a resolution for phase-wise elimination of nuclear weapons. This was the proposal which was sponsored by India along with the support of the 21 countries. Phase-wise elimination of nuclear weapons from 1996 till 2020. Had this proposal been accepted, so the world would have become nuclear free by the year 2020. So India was the one which piloted a resolution along with the support of other 21 countries for phase-wise elimination of nuclear weapons. Right. One more important point: a major voice inside the United Nations is of non-aligned countries. Non-aligned countries constitute a very significant voice within the United Nations. All right. So, emergence of non-aligned countries as a very significant force inside the UN Security Council, inside the United Nations, representing the interest of developing and underdeveloped economies. For that, India has to be given a credit. So credit goes to India for creating a non-aligned group of countries, which played a key role in fighting for the rights of developing countries. That is another contribution of India. All right. One more important contribution of India, if we can talk about. In the year 1975, group of 77, it is known as G77. G77 basically developing countries. So at that point of time, in 1975, when they gave a call for creation of new international economic order that was given by the developing countries. So at that point of time, the number of developing countries was 77 only. So it was known as G77. And now the membership has expanded further, but still it continues to be known by G77. That is the significance of this. All right. So one of the important contributions of India is the demand that India, along with the support of other developing countries, the demand that there is creation of a new international economic order based on parity between developed and developing countries. So that should also be considered as a if the world today, the discussion between North and South, the North-South dialogue that is taking place in the world today, that is just because of India. That is just because India raised the issue of new international economic order. So that should also be considered India's contribution. Then fighting against global terrorism, that is also something on which India's contribution must be taken into mind when you talk to that. Okay, fight against global terrorism. India has always been having a policy of zero tolerance towards terrorism. India has a policy of zero tolerance towards global terrorism. Right, and with this zero tolerance policy, India has, along with other support of other countries, India has fought against the global terrorism. That should be considered India's contribution to the UN. And the policy of zero tolerance that I was talking about, that is used, CCIT, Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism, CCIT. That is a mechanism within the United Nations for fighting against global terrorism. All right. So CCIT is basically a draft plan or draft proposal, you can say. This is basically a very comprehensive draft, a very comprehensive draft on terrorism. All right. So this draft on terrorism, known as CCIT, Comprehensive Convention Against International Terrorism, that draft was developed by India. Okay. And many of the proposals of CCIT, Comprehensive Convention Against International Terrorism, that has been accepted by United Nations. All right. So one of the important contributions of India is zero tolerance towards terrorism, and this CCIT, Comprehensive Convention Against International Terrorism. Then we can also talk about something what is known as the UN Democracy Fund. India, along with the US, India is the second largest contributor after the US to a creation of a UN Democracy Fund for expansion of democracy, for promotion of democracy in the world. Right? US, along with the support of India, okay, they have created a fund within UN. A UN Democratic Fund has been created. India is the second largest contributor after the US to the UN Democracy Fund. And the goal of this UN Democracy Fund is to ensure the expansion and strengthening of democracy in the world. Right. And the fund, which was created in 2005 by Dr. Manmohan Singh when he was the Prime Minister. Okay. And India, as I have told you, is the second largest contributor to the UN Democracy Fund. That point also should be going in India's favor. All right. Now, so far, another important one, India has served UN Security Council as a India has served UN Security Council as a non-permanent member 8 times. That should also be considered as India's contribution. That India has served UN Security Council 8 times. India has served 8 times as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council, starting from the year 5051. Starting from the year 5051, when India as an independent country was so young. So starting in 1950-51, that was the first time when India became a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council. Okay, then 72, 73, 77, 78. I'm talking about the years. 84, 85, 91, 92. Okay, 2011, 2012, and now 21, 22. So starting 50, 51, 70, 72, sorry, 72, 73, 77, 78, 84, 85, 91, 92, 2011, 2012, and now 21, 22. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. It should be 8 times. I'm missing something. 84, 85, 91, 92, 77, 78. Okay, one I have missed. 67, 68. This is what I had missed. So 50, 51, 67, 68, 72, 73, 77, 78, 84, 85, 91, 92, and 2011, 12, and now at 21, 22. So India has, this should be considered India's contribution, major contribution to the UN. So India has served UN Security Council as a non-permanent member 8 times. That should also be undertaken as India's contribution to the United Nations. All right. So I've already told you that so whether it is North-South dialogue, demand for new international economic order, so India has a very significant contribution to the UN. So if they ask you what has been India's contribution to the UN, so this is the point that you can. Now, coming down to the question of India's permanent member to UN Security Council, what are the issues? What should be India's strategy? Let me complete this topic. So you just need to remember the points, because most of the questions that will be asked from this paper will require a point-wise answer. So kindly remember all these points. Right. Now, is India ready to take up this responsibility of a permanent member of the UN Security Council? Okay. On this, I'll start with, to answer this question, I will start with a situation that emerged during early 50s. Before People's Republic of China, it was Nationalist China, KMT, Kuomintang, KMT, just reading. So, Nationalist China was a permanent member of UN Security Council. After the revolution, it became PRC, People's Republic of China. Neither Soviet Union nor United States of America were in favor of making China, People's Republic of China, as a permanent member of UN Security Council. So when the revolution became successful in China, and from Nationalist China, it became the People's Republic of China. So Soviet Union, because Soviet Union considered it as a threat to its leader of global communism, Soviet Union thought that Soviet Union is the leader of global communism. So it was a threat to Soviet Union's leadership of global communism because of that. And US, because of its conflict with China, and US because a communist party has come to power in China, because of that, it was very much wary of communism. So both Soviet Union and US, they approached India unofficially There is no documentary evidence of that. But in several books, you will find a mention of this. Both US and Soviet Union, they approached Jawaharlal Nehru, Prime Minister of India, and wanted India to replace China as a permanent member of UN Security Council. So they were never in favor of that from nationalist China, the People's Republic of China should be given. So what they wanted, that India should be replacing China as a permanent member of UN Security Council. Way back in 1950. Now you can well understand. It was a golden opportunity for India to join UN Security Council. So I have started this question, is India ready? India was not ready at that point of time. And if you believe, maybe India is not ready even now. India refused. Why India refused? For two reasons. One is that India did not have the capability at that point of time. India was not a military power, great military power. India was a military very weak country. So India was not in a position to play the role which we were supposed to play as a permanent member of UN Security Council. We had our own economic priorities. We had the food issues, food shortage, so many things. Economically, we were in pretty bad shape. And secondly, Nehruji wanted to keep India away from the global power politics for a few years. Never wanted to make India very controversial because India would be needing everyone. So he refused. One more reason that can be cited here, why India refused? Because replacing China would have made India a permanent enemy of China for all the time to come. Right now, at least we have a workable relationship with China. But had India replaced China at that point of time, okay, that would have made China a permanent enemy of India for all the time to come. Right now, China considers there is a rivalry between India and China. Maybe China considers India as a rival. Maybe India also considers as a rival. But the thing is that still we work together at several forums. We work together in BRICS. We work together in Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So India was not ready at that point of time. So India refused. But once again, I'm telling you that there is no documentary evidence of this. The only thing that I can tell you is that no documentary evidence from the government side. But yes, in several books, you will find a reference. Now, coming back to the question, is India ready now to become a permanent member of the UN Security Council? Very difficult to answer this question because India has always tried to remain in a safe zone. We have always avoided controversy. After getting UN Security Council seat, if India becomes a permanent member of UN Security Council seat, then India will be required to give its view on every issue which we have avoided till now. On any controversial, we have always tried to keep ourselves away from the controversy. Even in the case of Ukraine war, you can see, we have failed to call spade a spade. It is a clear-cut aggression, whatever may be the reason. But Russian aggression on Ukraine or Russian annexation of Crimea 2014 is a clear-cut case. But India never condemned that. So if India becomes a permanent member of the UN Security Council, India will be required to give its view on almost every issue, which may be a very difficult for India, maybe difficult for India. So some critics say that India's foreign policy machinery is not fully geared up now to undertake this great responsibility as a permanent member of UN Security Council. One more important point, India's ability and capability to influence and exercise its power has always been doubtful, and it's still doubtful. I repeat this point what I have said. India's ability or capability, because as a permanent member of the UN Security Council, you will have to exercise your influence. Without that, it's not possible. So India's ability to influence and exercise its power has always been doubtful, and to some extent, it is doubtful even now. So just I was trying to answer the question whether India is ready for that or not. Okay. Let us look into this question from some other dimensions. What is the mandatory requirement to become a permanent member of the UN Security Council? See, there are two things. One is, what is explicit requirement? Explicit means mandatory. What is very clear. And another is implicit. What is implied for? Explicit means very clear. You need a support of 2/3 of the UN General Assembly members. This is the first mandatory requirement. You need to be supported by 2/3 members of UN General Assembly. So if there are 193 out of that, 2/3 members must support. This is the first requirement. Second mandatory requirement is you must be supported by P5, permanent 5, and a positive vote. Nobody should be exercising its veto power. So positive vote of P5 members, that is required. So even if you obtain this 2/3, that also is not very, because China has a big cloud, okay, inside United Nations, So whether you will be getting a 2/3 member support out of 193, there is a question mark on that. And secondly, even if you get that, getting a support of all P5 positive vote may be difficult. So this is the explicit requirement, mandatory requirement. But what is more important for us is what is implicit requirement. Means anybody who could get support of 2/3 members of UN General Assembly and P5 members could become a permanent member of UN Security Council. So a small country like Costa Rica or Colombia or Iceland, any small country, newly independent country, now South Sudan. So any independent country, any small country with this 2/3 member of UN General Assembly support and permanent 5 members positive vote can become. That is the explicit requirement. All right. So anybody could become. But will anybody become? No. No. The question is, who can become the Prime Minister of India? So you would say that anybody who is a member of Parliament, anybody who can become a member of Prime, can become the Prime Minister of this country. But will everybody become? Can anybody become? The answer is no. Because to become a Prime Minister, you require a support, you require a caliber, you require a capability, you require a maneuvering skill, you need to be manipulated. So not everybody can become the Prime Minister. It is also very clear. Why? Because everybody doesn't fill up the implicit criteria. What is implied? Implicit means what is implied? What is that criteria? What is implicit criteria? Means implicit criteria means your ability to act. Whether you have an ability whenever it is required. US intervened in Syria. US intervened in Afghanistan. Will you be able to do that? Ability to act. Maybe you have a military power, but whether you are able to act. Ability to act. This is the first implicit criteria. Ability to maintain order. Can you maintain order in the world? I'm just trying to clarify what do I mean by implicit criteria. So your ability to act when it is required, your ability to maintain order in the world, okay, or play off international influence. Can you display the way US, the way China, the way Russia, they are displaying their influence on the world? Can you do that? So that is also the implicit criteria. All right. Then your capacity to contribute is very important. Now, when we talk about capacity to contribute, I'll be talking about two kinds of contribution. One is the financial contribution, another is the peacekeeping contribution. So far as peacekeeping contribution is concerned, yes, India's track record is good, and India has been contributed towards UN peacekeeping mission. So from that point of view, okay, ability to contribute, so peacekeeping is fine. But when it comes to financial contribution, that is also important. Financial contribution, ability to contribute has two kinds of contribution. One is contribute towards peacekeeping force, and the second is financial contribution. Now, in terms of financial contributions, when we talk about the current situation is US is the topmost contributor to the UN. Financial contribution. Japan is number 2 contribution to the UN. Okay. Germany is number 3 contribution to the UN. Even Brazil's contribution, if we talk about Brazil's contribution is also more than the India's contribution. Okay. Neither Japan is the permanent member, nor Germany is the permanent member, nor Brazil is the permanent. Okay. So if we talk about G4, so we'll find out of G4, other countries are contributing more, because right now G4 is considered as the most eligible bachelor, most eligible bachelor to enter inside the UN Security Council as a permanent. You got my point? But out of that, even when we talk about financial contribution, India's contribution is much less. And other countries, Japan, without being a UN Security Council permanent member, is contributing more. Germany, third largest contributor. Germany is also not a member. Japan is also not a member. What a point. So this is the implicit criteria. One more, military. Yes, on that you can give some point to India, because India is militarily, its air force, its navy, and its the ground force is very strong, quite strong. We have a modern army, we have modern air force, we have modern navy. Right. So on that count, yes, I have raised this point. I have raised this point because this will help India. This will help us in formulating our strategy. So it is very clear. It's very clear now that if India intends to enter into UN Security Council as a permanent member, it cannot do without the support of other G4 countries. So, one and the most important strategy that we need to adopt, that there should be unity among the G4 countries. They should not allow anyone, they should not allow US, they should not allow China, they should not allow any other power to play the game of dividing. So they should formulate a strategy, either all four of us or none of us. That should be the understanding among the G4 countries, either all four or none. It is only with this strategy that they can, because several times attempts have been made by the P5 countries to play a game of divide and rule. Sometimes they would offer to Germany, sometimes to say Germany, China would not oppose, all right? And Japan, US would not oppose. But they have tried to play the game of divide and rule. So what is required is either all G4 countries or none. So they should be formulating a strategy accordingly. Right. Before we go down to the strategic aspect, strategy that India should be formulating, before we do that, we talk about if they ask you the question, why should India be considered as a permanent member of UN Security Council? What are the points that goes in India's favor? Okay. Some points I have given you when I talked about India's contribution to the UN. I'll give you some more points to answer this question, that why should India be considered as a permanent member of UN Security Council? What makes India eligible? They can ask you differently. They can ask you what makes India capable to enter into UN Security Council as a permanent member. First important point. India has been able to successfully project itself. You will have to give me a minute, I'll switch off video just for 1 minute. There is some urgent thing. Sorry. So India has been able to successfully project itself as an emerging global power. I'm talking about the points that goes in India's favor, that why should India be considered as a permanent member of UN Security Council? So India has been successful in projecting itself as an emerging global power. This is the first point. Second point is, India is the biggest soft power of the world. Now, what do we mean by soft power? A country which is respected by all, a country whose acceptability is very high in the world. A country which is friend of all and enemy of none. So India's soft power image, the second point, the soft power image of India, the biggest soft power of the world, and its wider global acceptability. Its wider global acceptability. That is the point that goes in India's favor. Third point, we are a country which believes in unity and diversity. Our faith in multiculturalism, the diverse culture prevailing in the country, a multicultural country, multicultural outlook, and well-established secular credential. Another important point, India's secular credentials, its unity and diversity, and its multiculturalism, multicultural outlook. This is also a point which goes in our favor. All right. One point which I have mentioned earlier, while talking about India's contribution to the UN, that India has served UN Security Council, the most experienced, the kind of experience which India has. So India has served UN Security Council as a non-permanent member 8 times. So that is something also that point will be going in India's favor. Apart from that, India has been elected to several international bodies. Whether we talk about the World Human Rights Council, whether we talk of International Court of Justice, whether we talk about ECOSOC. And currently, India is a member of 22, if I'm not wrong, 22 different UN bodies. India is currently a member of 22 different UN bodies. So India has got a wide experience of serving the UN in different capacity, including its membership to various UN bodies. All right. So that is something which will go in India's favor. All right. One more important point. India is a responsible nuclear power. Why? India's claim to UN Security Council membership should be very high, because India is a responsible nuclear power, responsible but restrained nuclear power. We have developed nuclear capability long time back, but we have never misused that. We have never used to threaten anyone. What a point, unlike Pakistan. So India's credibility as a responsible nuclear power, that is also the point which should be going in India's favor. All right. One more important point. I said responsible nuclear power means a creditable track of record that India has so far as nuclear non-proliferation is concerned. What a point. It was China who just supplied nukes to North Korea. It was China who has supplied nukes to Pakistan, and from Pakistan it went to Iran. But India, despite developing nuclear capability over a period of time, India's track record for nuclear non-proliferation is undoubted, creditable. So that is something also, and on that basis only, India got an energy waiver that we had not signed non-proliferation treaty. So without signing non-proliferation treaty, India entered into a nuclear deal, civil nuclear deal with the United States of America. And India has also signed civil nuclear deal with a host of other countries, including Australia and Japan. They have already signed. So without joining NPT, without signing NPT, a country like US, which has imposed sanctions on India when India did second nuclear explosion in 1998, you are aware of that. And the same country enters into a nuclear deal with you, 2005. So India's creditable track record, and on that basis only, India got an energy waiver. Energy waiver we got. But without becoming a member of Energy Nuclear Supply Group, India could be trading into the nuclear raw materials. So we got an energy waiver. So India's creditable track record as a credible track record so far as nuclear non-proliferation is concerned, that is also a point which will be going in India's favor. Right. Of course, the one point which I have mentioned earlier, India's significant contribution to the UN peacekeeping force. That point I have already made earlier. I'll not repeat that. Right. One more important point. India is a country where 1/6 of the humanity lives. 1/6 of the world's humanity, 134 crore, 134, 135 crore population. So 1/6 of the world humanity lives in India. And maybe India is likely to be the most populous country, people say, by the year 2025 and so on and so forth. So such a portion of planet, representing 1/6 of the humanity, deserves a seat, permanent seat in the UN Security Council. You cannot keep India out of UN Security Council for a longer period of time. A country which represents 1/6 of the humanity. So on that basis, that could also be a point that we can write when we had asked a question, is that on what basis India should be considered as a permanent member of the UN Security Council. Right. Then India has been a key player in fighting against global terrorism, the point I have mentioned earlier. All right. So all these points you can write. I've given you about 12, 13 points. This you can write if you are asked a question, on what basis India should be considered as a permanent member of UN Security Council, to become a permanent member of UN Security Council. Now, coming to the question of what should be India's strategy. Any question if you want to ask, you can just ask me. Now I'll be shifting to what should be India's strategy to secure a permanent seat of UN Security Council. Any question, any doubt? Okay. Now, about India's strategy. I want you to be aware of the ultimate truth before we decide about the strategy. Okay, the point I have made earlier, that none of the P5 members, they want any change in the UN Security Council. On that, they are on the same page. What is this ultimate truth? For example, USA has made a promise to Japan that US supports Japan as a permanent member of UN Security Council. Right. Now, what is the truth of this? US feels that there is no harm, in supporting Japan, because Japan and China, they are rival. There is rivalry between them. And US has a close tie-up with Japan. And US wants to divide China and Japan. And for that, US has promised Japan a permanent seat in the Security Council that US would always support. Whenever the issue comes, US will support it. Now, US is supporting Japan because the US is very clear on this point that the moment Japan's proposal to become a permanent member of UN Security Council comes, China and Russia both are going to use their veto powers, and Japan will not be able to. So what is the harm in supporting Japan? Because we know ultimately Japan will not be successful. So what is it? There is no harm. Let us support Japan. The first ultimate truth. The US is supporting Japan because US knows that both China and Russia, they are going to block it using the veto power. All right. Now, coming down to Germany, the other G4 member. All right. Now, China has said that China will be supporting Germany's membership to UN Security Council. China has already promised. All right. Now, China knows that when the proposal comes for Germany, both US and France, they will use the veto power. They will not allow Germany to become a permanent member of UN Security Council. They know it very well. So what is the harm? Support Germany. So this kind of endorsement of Japan by US or endorsement of Germany by China practically doesn't mean anything. What do I mean? So this is the second ultimate truth. Now, come down to India. When it comes to India, both USA and Russia, they have declared the support. US Prime Minister Barack Obama came to India 2010, I believe, and while addressing the joint session of parliament, said that US would be the first country to support India as a permanent member of UN Security Council. All right. US has declared India support. Russia also has already, before that, Russia has declared support. But both US and Russia, they have supported India. They're supporting India publicly. They're endorsing India's case. Why? Because they know that when the issue comes, China will block it. China will not allow it to happen. So what is the harm? That is why I said you in the beginning that none of the P5 members, they want any change. On this issue, they are on the same page. This is the ultimate truth. So any strategy which you formulate, okay, must be based on this stark reality that is existing. All right. Now, what should be India's strategy? See, people understand only in global power politics, people understand only the language of power. Want a point? People understand only the language of power. So first strategy should be to focus upon internal strengthening of India. Make India internally very strong. Now, how can you make India internally very strong? By making India a $5 trillion economy, at least, the goal which I fixed. You cannot become a great power, military power, without becoming a great economic power. Because the way towards military powership, the way towards military power goes through economic power. Without economic power, you cannot become military power. Right now, India is a military power, but based on the import. So no country could become a great defense power, great military power by simply importing its equipment. Got a point? Now you are dependent on procuring defense equipment from other countries. So no country could ever become a great without becoming a great, without producing the military equipments in the own country. And for that, you need to be a strong economic power. China as a country, a major country opposing India's claim is China. And China will always veto that. But if you reach to the level of $5-7 trillion of economic, if you reach to that economic level, so China will not be able to say no. China understands the language of power. So first strategy of India should be to focus. See, this no short-term strategy is going to work. I'm talking what we're discussing. We are discussing our strategy to become a permanent member of UN Security Council. So no short-term planning is going to happen. The current news that you listen here and there is just a media creation, nothing more than that. Nothing is going to happen for next few years. Let me again tell you. At least not till 2025, 2003. Nothing is going to happen. No change is going to happen. Let me assure you, let me tell you. For any change to happen in UN Security Council, you need to become a great economic power. So India should be focusing upon building itself a great economic power, internal strengthening of India. The second point, India must work very closely with three other G4 members, Japan, Germany, Brazil, and must not allow big powers to divide them. The point I have made earlier. The strategy is very clear, either all four of us or none of us. So if the seat is offered to Germany, Germany must refuse it. That without India and Japan and Brazil being part of it, I will not join. If it is offered to Japan, Japan should reject that offer. If it is offered to India, India should also be willing to reject that offer. That's very important. Because if you become a victim of divide and rule game of the big powers, nothing is going to happen. What I mean? So India must work very closely with the three big powers. See, the calculation is very simple. If all these countries together, Germany, Japan, Brazil, India, within the next 2 to 3 years, if they become a $20 trillion economy together, if they become, it will be very difficult for a country like China to oppose them. So the calculation is very simple. So the second point which I have said, that India must work very closely with the other G4 members. All right. One of the mandatory requirements to become a permanent member of UN Security Council is that you must get a 2/3 members support. It will be very difficult as of now, very difficult because the kind of clout that China has. It will be very difficult because China has brought several countries into a debt trap. Evidence that. It will be very difficult for a country like India to get a 2/3 membership. Very difficult. So you need to formulate your strategy for that. This way, India should take up the cause of all small, developing and underdeveloped countries of the world inside United Nations. Inside UN General Assembly, India should be taking up their cause, raising their issues. See, how do you expect that people should be accepting you as a leader of third world country, unless and until you contribute something for them, unless and until you fight for their cause? Just because India is the greatest soft power of the world, they will support you? Why? So, third strategy that India should be adopting, that India should be taking up the cause of the small, developing and underdeveloped countries of the world inside UN, to become the natural leader, so that they cannot refuse their support when you ask for. That should be the strategy of India. All right. One more important point. India should play a regional diplomacy. What do you mean regional diplomacy? For example, apart from having a bilateral relationship, trying a bilateral supporting each other, India should also enter into regional diplomacy. For example, Organization of African States, they have 54 countries. So if you enter into understanding with them, so you can be assured of support of all 54 countries. So India should play a regional diplomacy. All right, OPEC countries, Organization of African States, Latin American countries. So dealing with the region as a whole to get their support. All right, because if you are dealing as a region, so then you are assured of the support of the big chunk of countries. Getting individual support may be difficult, but getting regional support could be easier. So India should play a regional diplomacy. All right. The way towards global leadership process through your neighborhood country. Without becoming a regional leader, you cannot become a global leader. Seeking a seat in UN Security Council is like becoming a global leader. But the kind of differences that you have with a country like Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Myanmar. So what is important that first India is required to be, the Pakistan is already greatest enemy of India. In Afghanistan, Taliban are in power. What they're going to do, nobody knows. So a country which has failed to emerge as a regional leader of South Asia, how can it expect to be a global leader? So for that, you have to formulate a strategy that you have to ensure that SAARC becomes successful. That is very important. First, India should be trying to become a regional leader of SAARC. India should contribute towards strengthening the SAARC. That's very important. Because you cannot become a global leader without becoming a regional leader. That's very important. So one of the strategy of India should be to make SAARC strong enough with its support. That is yet another point that should be the strategy that India should be adopting. One more important point. India is required to show it to the world. And for that, India needs support of all the G4 countries. That UN Security Council, with its current structure and the current composition, is the most illegitimate body of the world. India, along with the support of G4 countries, is required to expose, is required to produce a kind of white paper on the functioning of UN Security Council. That UN Security Council, with its current formation and current structure, current composition, is the most illegitimate body of the world. Why? Because it is highly unrepresented, highly underrepresented. Not all the regions are adequately represented inside UN Council. So we need it. We need to tell it to the world. That should be our strategy. We need it to spread this news to the world that UN Security Council in its current structure is the most illegitimate international body. We need to challenge that. So everything that I'm talking about is a long-term perspective. There is no short route. There is no shorter route to UN Security Council membership. Don't believe in what the media says, because they're trying to sell the news. They're trying to create a sensation. If you listen to them, it looks like that within a couple of months, India is going to join UN as a permanent member of the Security Council. That's not going to happen. There is no short-term route. There is no shorter route. Only long-term perspective and only a long-term route. So for this requires a long-term policy. And without that, it's not going to happen. See, the biggest opposition to India is likely to come from Japan. Likely to come from China. Because China is like being to power. We are aware of that. So one of the strategies of India is how to neutralize China. How to neutralize China, that should be the motive of India. So India will have to bargain it out with China. India is working with China at SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization. We are working with China and the BRICS also. So we need to neutralize China. We need to get China support. So one of our strategies should be back channel diplomacy to neutralize China. The back channel diplomacy using a third country, for example, using Russia, because Russia is a friend of India also, Russia is a friend of China also. So using a back channel diplomacy by using a third power, which is in good relationship with both the countries, to convince China. So that effort should continue. Back channel diplomacy, neutralizing and convincing China, that should also continue. All right. Now, suppose we have adopted all these strategies, still it is not happening. As I told you, nothing is going to happen in the short-term or long-term perspective. I've told you. Suppose if nothing happens, can you think of some alternative strategy? Can you think of some alternative strategy? Can you suggest something? Let me talk about Gandhian strategy. Let us see if it can work. Last resort, Gandhian strategy. What is that? I've told you the most important thing in your strategy should be to challenge the legitimacy of UN Security Council in its current structure and form. That is the most important strategy. Challenging the legitimacy of UN Security Council in its current formation and structure. Okay. So what you should be doing? 3 things I'll be talking about, very, very small things. 1, India, along with the other G4 countries, Germany, Japan, and Brazil, should refuse to participate in the election of non-permanent member of UN Security Council. It will be very difficult for UN Security Council to function in the absence of non-permanent member of UN Security Council. All right. So India, with the other G4 members, they should refuse to participate in the election of non-permanent member of UN Security Council. Now you can ask me that without their participation, election will not held. Yes, election will certainly be held. But the 4 most eligible countries for UN Security Council membership, if they are not participating in the election of non-permanent member of UN Security Council, that is a challenge to the legitimacy of UN Security Council. That India, Germany, Japan, Brazil, who are the most eligible countries for UN Security Council membership, and they are not participating. So it will raise a question mark on the legitimacy of the UN Security Council, and that is what we want. Point is clear. Now, Number two, many a times you must have seen UN Security Council takes action for violation of international law by some country. For example, sometimes Iran, sometimes North Korea, sometimes China. So for violation of international law or for proliferation of nuclear weapons. So sometimes, many times, UN Security Council is required to take action. All right. Sometimes in the UN, sometimes the UN Security Council. So whenever it comes for vote, whenever an action is required to be taken against any country for their bad behavior, these G4 members, along with India, should refuse to vote against that country. That was the point. And that we have exercised several times. When it came to vote against Russia, so several times India and other countries, they have voted against that. So the G4 members should refuse to vote against the country which is being penalized for a bad behavior by the UN. This should be the second act, second resort when you talk the Gandhian strategy. Because basically, we want to challenge the legitimacy of the UN. Mahatma Gandhi wanted to challenge the legitimacy of the British rulers, and we want to challenge the legitimacy of UN in its current structure and form. And third, and the last one, if nothing works, G4 members, along with India, should refuse to participate in the UN peacekeeping mission whenever they are asked to do. In order to build up a pressure on UN Security Council, in order to build up a pressure on these P5 members, all right, in order to prove that UN Security Council in its current structure and form is the most illegitimate body of the world, what we are required to do, we in these countries should refuse to participate in the UN peacekeeping mission. All right. So if a question is asked on the strategy that India should be adopting to become a UN Security Council member, so I have given you enough points for that. Any question if you want to ask, you can ask. So that brings an end to the discussion on the topic of India and the UN. I have dealt with almost every from every aspect. Whatever question they ask you should be able to write an answer to that. If you have any other question in your mind, you can ask. All the points are clear or not? Pradeep, your question is not clear. You have only said that these 3 points from not going to peacekeeping, not voting in favor of any country for a bad behavior. What is your question now? You are repeating what I have said. See, it is not like that. All the countries, they are, see, I have told you about implicit and explicit powers. I have also told you that these G4 countries are the most eligible countries. Every country cannot become. They may be fulfilling the mandatory requirement, but every country cannot become. Every country cannot become a permanent unitary council. So the point that I have made is that the two things are very clear in this point that I have made. One is that we need to tell it to the world that UN Security Council in its current structure and form is the most illegitimate body. So the objective is to prove the illegitimacy of the UN. That is precisely the point. All right. See, do you think, for example, Pakistan, do you think Pakistan can think in terms of becoming a permanent member of the Security Council? Pakistan doesn't have that kind of credibility, doesn't have that kind of power. Do you think Sri Lanka will ever try to do that? Do you think Nepal can try to do that? Say, to become a member, I've given you several points why India should be considered. Why India should be considered. Okay. Uh, let me see the syllabus now. And next topic that we'll take up will be India's foreign policy. Okay. And let me see the content of the syllabus. I can tell you what we are going to do. Where is syllabus? I'm not able to locate. Let me find out the syllabus. Give me a minute. Yeah, I always keep it very handy, but this time it is not available. Okay, it's not available. See, the syllabus says determinants of India's foreign policy, if I remember it correctly. Determinants of India's foreign policy. Okay. Institutions in the foreign policy making. Continuity and change in India's foreign policy. These are the three things that is in their syllabus. Determinants of foreign policy, institutions in foreign policy making, and continuity and change in India's foreign policy. All right. This is a general syllabus. So I'll be taking India's foreign policy as a whole, because they can ask you, this is the first topic, and topic number 1 from India and the world, and they can ask you any question from that. But one question is mandatory from the chart. What is foreign policy? Before we talk about the determinants of India's foreign policy. What is foreign policy? The policy to be discussed at 2 different levels. When we talk about foreign policy, we talk about foreign policy at the macro level, and we talk about foreign policy at the micro level, at 2 levels. For example, you talk about India's foreign policy, that what should be India's approach to dealing with other countries, how India should be able to pursue its national interest. So there are certain philosophical foundations of your policy, some ideological foundation of your foreign policy, that we believe in this. For example, you say that non-alignment is one of the policy of India at the macro level. You believe in Panchsheel as a foreign policy of India. You say building relationship with the neighborhood countries. Priority should be given in building a relationship with the neighborhood countries. That should be the foreign policy of India. Making India a global power. That should be the foreign policy of India. So foreign policy at the macro level. That this is the foreign policy of India. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Opposing terrorism in all its form. That is the foreign policy of India. Means foreign policy at the macro level. And that should apply to all the countries. Foreign policy at the macro level should apply in general to all the countries. US has a foreign policy. China has a foreign policy. Russia has a foreign policy. So every country has its foreign policy in general. But there is a micro level foreign policy which is country specific. Because the policy which you have with China may not work with Pakistan. The policy which you have with Pakistan may not work with Nepal. So you have a foreign policy specific to specific countries. So what we call the country-specific foreign policy. That is where the micro-level foreign policy comes to the fore. India's foreign policy towards Pakistan, India's policy towards China, India's policy towards Japan, India's policy towards Britain, India's policy towards US, India's policy towards Russia. So we have a country-specific foreign policy. That is foreign policy at the macro level, micro level. So when you, because with every country, you have a specific kind of relationship. Maybe you have some special partnership with the country. Maybe you have a special alliance with the country. Maybe you have entered into a specific trade relation with the country. The kind of strategic partnership India has with US, India will not be having with other countries. So foreign policy at the macro level and foreign policy at the micro level. This is what is we need to discuss. This is what we need to find out. So I'll be going beyond what is prescribed, what they are. Because India's foreign policy, discussion on India's foreign policy, a lecture on India's foreign policy will help you to write so many answers from this topic. So I'll be discussing this topic slightly elaborately, much more than what is mentioned in your syllabus. Because I know from which portion is more important. Foreign policy determinants. Again, a very looks like a theoretical topic, but it is not. What determines the foreign policy of a country? The factors that shape the foreign policy of a country. Some of the factors that shape the policy of a country could be fixed, could be permanent. Some of the factors which shape or influence the foreign policy of the country could be contemporary issues, could be based on the contemporary events, or some of the factors which can change over a period of time. For example, India's protectionist policy, India's policy of protectionism, till India adopted a policy of economic liberalization in 1991, till then, we were adopting a policy of protectionism. We were not allowing goods from other countries to enter into our territory. Why? Because they could have posed a competition to Indian products. So Indian products could have, we were perceiving a threat from the foreign products. So in order to prevent them from freely selling the product in the Indian market, so what we used to do, we used to impose higher level of customs duty on those products. So we are trying to prevent the entry into Indian. Electronic goods, 400% duty. On vehicles, 500% duties. That is the kind of duty to impose. But as the policy changed, we adopted a free trade policy. We adopted a policy of economic liberalization. So we had to forgo our policy of protectionism and we had to adopt a policy of free trade. So certain factors will change. But the factors which determine the foreign policy of a country would be both fixed factors and the changing factors. For example, geography as a factor determining the foreign policy of a country, a fixed factor. Usually, if you talk about geography as a factor influencing the foreign policy of India, a vast size of the country, 7th largest country in the world, with 3 million square kilometers of territory, 7,500 kilometers of the sea coastline, Indian Ocean from all 3 sides of Indian territory, surrounded by 2 hostile neighbors across the border, one side China, other side Pakistan, the areas of Aksai Chin, You know, originally India did not have a border with China. You are aware of that? Because Tibet was an autonomous territory in between. So Tibet was a buffer state between India and China. But annexation of Tibet by China gave China a border with three states: Nepal, Bhutan, India. Now you tell me whether this kind of geography and geographical change, geography never changes, but China changed the geography of the world. By annexing Tibet, China got a border with Nepal, Bhutan, and India. Will it not impact India's foreign policy? When 26/11 happened, the terrorists, they entered from the seaside. 7,500 kilometers of the coastline will not impact your geography. Three-sided open border with Nepal will not impact your foreign policy. Because of the geography, because of the geographical border, circulation of fake currency notes from Pakistan, from Bangladesh towards India, supply of narcotics from across the border. Most of India's foreign trade, they crosses through Indian Ocean. You are aware of that. So there is a very dense traffic. A great movement of merchant ships in the Indian Oceans, proceeding from and moving towards Europe, West Asia, and Southeast Asia. Keeping this, because entire energy import of India crosses through that. So why are we so much bothered about China's entry inside Indian Ocean? Why are we bothered? Because of the geographical factors. Why are we talking about Quad? Why are we talking about Indo-Pacific? Because we want to keep this Indian Ocean region free of any kind of disturbances, possible disturbances by China. So we have entered into Quad, Indo-Pacific Agreement. So geography as a major factor, as a fixed factor in influencing India's foreign policy. All right, so we'll continue from here. We have started our discussion on foreign policy determinants, and we have discussed first point, geography as a determinant factor. Okay, and we'll continue. All right. Any question if you want to ask? All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, all of you. God bless you all. See you tomorrow. All right. Thank you so much.